Hey friends, thank you so much for tuning in. In today's episode, I'll be speaking with Tobias Leenaert. The massive contributions Tobias has made in the animal rights movement and his encouragement of a pragmatic approach is why he's been invited to the show. His book, How to Create a Vegan World, has been hugely influential to me and to many others throughout the animal protection movement. I deeply admire Tobias. I'm confident you'll enjoy hearing more about his insights and approach. How are you doing, brother? How's that going? What's the novel about?
It's just a writing sabbatical, so I'm working on a novel. Maybe I told you about it before, but I'm trying to really finish it now and be able to submit in to an agent in May or June. Been working diligently on that.
I'm sure you already know this, but many of the most influential books in history have been novels, even though they're fictional. So I think if there's anybody out there who could write a good book, a good novel to convey this message effectively, it's you. I'm really excited about that. Not everybody in our shared movement shares the same level of openness to something that isn't absolute or all or nothing. So have you received a lot of pushback? If so, how have you responded to this pushback?
hmm Yeah, it's true that some people have difficulty with this attitude where you don't see things in black and white. So the black and white attitude would be like veganism is good, all the rest is bad. Even 95% vegan is still abusing animals, etc. So that's the black and white view. That's not, I think, a productive view at this point in time. So I'm not really in favor of that, except in certain circumstances. But as a general rule, I'm not in favor of that. So, and yes, that gets pushback from the people who really want the black and white thing, and they would say things like, "Oh, you cannot abuse a child um, 1 day a week or something, even. So you have to be perfect across the board." And I think that's a bad comparison because I mean, you're comparing something that 99% of people celebrates, which is eating meat, with something that is illegal and that 99% of the people will approve of. So you have to use different strategies and different thinking around these two different topics. But anyway, yeah, in terms of pushback, I used to get a lot. It's died down a lot in the last couple of years. Maybe that's also because I blocked the people on Facebook who are nasty about this. I mean, I'm totally fine with criticism, but sometimes the criticism is not civil or not fair or whatever. And then if people stick to that, I would block them and I don't see them anymore. But basically, in terms of like how I respond to that, um, sometimes there's nothing you can do, and people will just have their opinion about you and you don't have to even try. But other than that, what I ask people is, first of all, to be open minded about strategies, to just not assume that the thinking has been done. I always say thinking is vegan. You're allowed to think, you know. The thinking has not been done in the sense that we can continually improve our strategies. And we have to do that because the challenge is so humongous and we have to get better and better and better at it. So that's why we have to keep thinking and keep an open mind about what works and what doesn't work. And we have to study and we have to do research, etc. So we have to be open. And the thing is, if you just stick to your rules, veganism is this and vegan is that and non-vegan is blah 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 and meat is this. If you stick to this orthodoxy, you're not open. Then you're dogmatic. You're closed-minded. You will not learn about new ideas. So that's not a good attitude. And another thing I think, and it's very important, I ask people who are critical of me or of other pragmatic activists, I just ask them, like, please have faith, have trust that I do this for the exact same reason that you do it. It is to end animal suffering and exploitation. And I'm not trying to sell books. I mean, you don't get rich from selling a niche book like that. I'm not trying to be have some original interesting theory or something. I'm just trying to develop something that I hope works. That's it. That's it for the animals. And I just ask people to, like, imagine that you are the pig in the cage and you are looking at us, at our movement. And imagine that you are the pig, and what do you see? Do you see an effective movement, or do you see people caring just about their little rules and their orthodoxy and their fighting internally or whatever? No, always take that viewpoint, and then I think it's a lot more easy to be open-minded and to focus especially on what works or what we think works.
So often we can get into the habit of doing something simply because it's what we've always done. It requires us to be a little bit more analytical. about that and to look at what is effective, because ultimately all that matters at the end of the day is if we've created a better world for animals. A world where fewer animals are suffering and the suffering is to a much lesser degree. I think your book, your work, and your push to have us strategize and analyze our work is vital. How do you recommend vegans and animal rights activists engage with others in order to make the greatest impact for animals?
Yeah, so to talk to others or in talk to others, I would always recommend that people start with an audience-centric view or position. So you're going to like look at the audience and look what they can use, what is useful for them, what will change them, what will be effective for them, rather than starting from your own viewpoint or your own situation. If you start from your own situation, you would be doing things or saying things that you think are right for you, that you believe, and that all sounds very noble and that sounds logical. But for instance, I may believe that meat is murder, and that may be my true belief, and that's something that I really some orthodoxy again that is very dear to my heart. But what I have to wonder about is, will this meat and murder message arrive well with other people? So that is a completely different approach. You're going to look at the audience that you're speaking to, and you're going to wonder, what am I going to say that um, yeah has a good reception, that is received well with them? Because the only value of a message is how it is received. There is no value, I think, in speaking your truth or whatever as such. Like if you can speak your truth, and that might be like some virtuous thing maybe, but if it doesn't have any effect, then the animals aren't being helped. It's just maybe good for you, for your relief, or whatever. So you have to look at the effect that you have, and you have to look at the audience. So in my book, I say I use the acronym YANYA, YANYA. You are not your audience. So you are not the audience you want to reach. The audience you want to reach is different from you. They have different motivations. They are interested in different things. So, for instance, they might not be interested very much in animals, right? And I am very much interested in animals, and that's the most important issue to me. But if I know that I'm sitting in front of like some politician who is involved in the environment or in public health, then of course I'm going to address that issue because I know that is relevant to them, right? Of course, you can't always know what is relevant to another person, or what will hit them or what will affect them. But yeah, then you could go for the lowest common denominator, or what research says is the most interesting thing. Like health, we know, is something that touches a lot of people, sometimes more than animals. It's also important to realize that moral messages have disadvantages. They can backfire. They can cause reactance. They can cause a lot of people to feel guilty and therefore get back at you. So the environmental and certainly the health messages cause less resistance. So that's some data point that you can take into account. Another thing, if you're audience centered, would be to think like from their perspective. Like, are they ready to go vegan? Is this like some 70-year-old guy who's never eaten a vegan burger in their life? Are you going to tell them to go vegan? Or maybe you could tell them to like, look, try this, go to this restaurant and try that, or let me cook a recipe with you, or whatever. So sometimes the go vegan ask might be a bridge too far. So you could ask other things. And lastly, I would say, yeah, sometimes people ask me what is the best argument for veganism. Then I say, like, do you have to have arguments? Maybe you can start with food, so you can maybe completely take out the arguments out of the equation, because we know that often they don't work, and you can start with food. You can eat together, you can give them something, you can take them to a restaurant, buy them groceries, whatever. And the thing is that once a person has a good taste experience, they might be a lot more open-minded to hear your messages and your arguments, because by then they hopefully know there's nothing to lose and there's good food still to be had. So this approach of the food first approach, I think, can be very productive in certain, or in many cases.
I love those approaches. Everything is about perception and trying to find a way to build a strong vegan community. So let me ask you this. How much value do you find in finding common ground with those who have differing views about animal rights, both externally, thinking meat eaters, and internally, like fellow vegans?
Yeah, so I mean, finding common ground is always good, and I think like with many people, you can find some common ground. Like, for instance, many people will, or most people will agree that animals have to be treated according to certain standards. You know, they might not agree with you that they cannot be killed for food, but they most of the time they will agree like, yeah, there's certain standards that we should uphold. They shouldn't suffer. They shouldn't be killed in pain or whatever. You know, they should be used anesthetized, etc., stunned. So there's a lot of ways to find commonality with the average person, and they will be able to say, I think, yeah, it would be good if we ate some less meat, and then you can try to to go to some kind of commitment or some whatever. You can give them some tool or something. Then yeah, that's a way to start a place to start from. Um, and with activists, yeah, I already talked about it. This common ground is that we have these same goals. So within the movement, people might differ about strategies and about the way to get there, but we all know where we want to get. It's a world without animal exploitation and suffering and killing, right? So um, that is, if we trust that everybody is about that, within our movement at least, then it becomes a lot more easy to differ in opinion, I think. And then lastly on this point, I think if you can't find common ground and if you have a lot of disagreement and differences, then I think it's still really important to disagree in a civil way. I think that's what's wrong with the world today. We are not able anymore to disagree in a civil way anymore. We are fighting when we disagree. So we should train ourselves to be able to have even very strong differences in opinion and remain civil with each other.
Interesting. What are some common challenges that animal advocates face today, and how would you recommend overcoming them?
Um, so, in terms of challenges, I would say in terms of activists within the movement, yeah, I mean, there is this fact that we are very passionate and are we going to differ about small things, even though our goals are the same. So we have to learn to agree and learn uh, to differ in opinion. That's just according to what I just said. There's the fact, of course, that we have um, a message that is to many people very unpalatable. You know, like it's quite a difficult message. It's quite a like a ambitious message. We put the bar very high, especially if we say go vegan. You know, it's not a message that many people can jump onto. I mean, more and more, and it's getting easier and easier. But for many people, if you look at it from their perspective, it's asking quite a lot. And if you look at, for instance, the opposition, all the people spreading misinformation. I was just reading a report on misinformation with all the things that people put on social media, from debunking the health of the health aspects of vegan products up to all kinds of conspiracy theories. You know, there's so much misinformation in there and so much bullshit, but in essence, it's very easy to sell because that is what people want to hear. People want to hear, want to get excuses for not changing, right? So they have a much easier time than we have. We have to convince them to drop something that they really love. So in that sense, that's a big challenge. We have to give them alternatives. We have to show them how to prepare them in these alternatives, etc., etc. Yeah. And then maybe on a more fundamental or a more structural scale, I think that our movement, the animal rights plant-based movement, still uh, yeah, lacks money. And it's easy to see that when you make a comparison, for instance, between our whole worldwide movement for farmed animals, all the organizations, the budget of the organizations who work for that, partially or entirely, that's maybe today 200, a bit over $200 million worldwide every year. But compare that, for instance, to an organization like UNICEF, which has $6 billion, just one organization, 6 billion compared to 200 million. So that means that we still quite small in a sense, in terms of what we can do. I think we're growing. I think we're convincing more and more people, and certainly slowly but surely governments to invest in this whole thing. And there's more and more foundations. I'm just in the Netherlands, and there's quite a few foundations here who are sponsoring or granting the plant-based movement or the animal rights movement. So I can see this thing growing, but we definitely need a lot more resources still if we want to reach our goal.
The rough budget of the entire movement to protect farm animals from abuse and cruelty is less than $300 million annually. They essentially have infinite resources, while ours are very finite. So it really comes down to each one of us to be as effective as possible. In your many years of animal advocacy, how has your worldview changed?
I think hasn't changed all that much. I still somehow, how do you say, vacillate. I change between belief and pessimism, optimism and pessimism. I generally am an optimist. I generally think we can make it, but then at one point I see another cruel thing that humans are doing or some horrible shit that we're doing, and then I think like, oh my god, we're never going to get there. So that has been the same for the past 25 years, I think. But generally I do think that optimism is a moral duty, so we have no choice but to be optimistic about this thing. um, I mean, if you look at worldview or my view of humans, I'm also all the time inspired by our movement, by what we do, even though sometimes there's infighting, etc. But it's so wonderful to have been all over the world speaking and giving uh, courses and etc. And everywhere in the world, you find these very committed activists who are not going to stop before this is over, and this in itself is a reason to know or to say that, yeah, we're gonna do this, we're gonna win this. Just the commitment of the people. I cannot see them stop or be stopped, so even though we're still comparatively small, the dedication of the people into this, the passion, I think it's the envy of a lot of other movements, the passion that we have. It's of course very important to at the same time be also strategic. But yeah, I think that in general, worldview hasn't changed much. I think that the date that I see the vegan world happening has, in all those years, has advanced for me in time. So while when I started out 25 years ago, and people asked me, "Do you think we'll ever stop eating meat as a society or as a world?" I would say, "Yeah, I think this will happen," but I thought it was something for science fiction for the 23rd, 24th century or something. And now I think that this is actually possible for it to happen this century. So yeah, I can see change happening definitely.
Well, that's nice to hear, especially from someone of your stature, intelligence, and awareness, to have that level of optimism. Recently, I learned about how they remove the eyeballs of female shrimp because it makes them breed quicker, and that just made me feel awful. But of course, the animal agriculture industry ignores their suffering in their quest to maximize profits. But then I hear about a brand new vegan company that's 3D printing meat, and it makes me think, okay, there is hope. I am generally optimistic as well, and I do believe that a vegan world will happen in time, but of course, it depends on our willingness to roll up our sleeves and do the hard work that needs to get done.
Yeah, if I can add something, I was just I'm in Amsterdam right now, and I was at the conference, a 2-day conference called Plant Forward, and it's a business conference, and people pay business to business prices to get in, but there were 900 people there. It was the best produced plant-based conference I've ever been to, and if you compare that to what we had 10 years ago. I mean, we had to beg as activists, we had to beg to get the attention of the business people, like please sponsor us or do whatever. And now it's like such a huge thing, and people earn money with these conferences, and there's so many people from all over. So, I mean, that just in itself, to see like a huge room with a huge screen and people very passionate and very excited, 900 of them or whatever, it's really it's moving, and it shows you how far we've come. I mean, that's also the advantage of being a little bit older and a little bit longer in the movement. You can see where you've come from, like, and the younger people, maybe they don't see progress, or they don't see it going fast enough. I can say, like, if you compare it with 25 years ago, there definitely has been a lot of progress, even though of course it's slower than we would want it to be.
That's a great way to think about things. So, what does advocacy mean to you? And how do you view social media? Is it a good place to engage in advocacy?
Yeah, I mean, advocacy can take a lot of forms, and you can have any sort of profession to and be an advocate for animals. You can be a banker, an advocate. You can be a business person. You can also be the traditional activist and advocate who you like is unemployed and is in the street and holding signs, etc. So there's so many different ways of uh, advocacy, and I think it's it's not just good for the beings that you want to help, in this case the animals, but it's also good for oneself. It gives your life a purpose. So I think that yeah, it's I wouldn't be surprised if people who are activists, I mean, there might be some pain in there as well, but that we live longer because of that, because we have a reason to live. I mean, other people have reason to live as well, of course, but this is an extra thing to, like, get out of bed for. So I think that's also an important thing. And then in terms of social media, yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is the beautiful thing, that we didn't have these things in the past. When I started out, there was no Facebook or there was no Instagram, and now everybody with some dedication and some will to learn some skills, like also with your help, what you do in terms of teaching people on social media. Um, Everybody who wants to invest the time has, in theory, the potential to reach a lot of people. So that is wonderful in itself, and there are many people who reach quite a number of people. There are people who reach more people, just individuals who reach more people than the average Belgian newspaper in my country. So that is quite incredible. So yeah, I think it's really good thing to, like, develop these skills and also to support other people in learning them. Yeah.
Can you give us some examples of some advocacy campaigns that you've been involved with?
Yeah, well, this goes back from a long time ago, or quite some time ago. We were in 2009. We convinced our city, which is Ghent in Belgium, to become the first city to have an official weekly vegetarian day, meatless day. And that was back then. It was the first city who did this, and it was news all around the world, and it's inspired a lot of people. So I'm very happy about the result. I think there's still consequences of that in the world today. So yeah, that's something I'm happy with. We put up a lot of conferences as well. I helped co-found ProVeg International, which is now an organization active in 11 countries with between 150 and 200 people, and we have a lot of interventions on all kinds of levels. So yeah, those are just some things that I've been involved in.
I understand the significance of community to you. I'm curious, how much importance do you place on collaboration within the vegan movement, both personally and within organizations?
Yeah, I mean, collaboration. I mean, the very minimum, first of all, is that we don't sabotage each other. Like, we don't work against each other, and we support each other, even if we differ. Um, and I think that collaboration with other organizations. I actually had a meeting today about more collaboration, and it's an obvious thing to think that we need more collaboration, and I think in general that is true, but it's also never obvious, and people and organizations have their own emphases and their own pet peeves, and we're all human, and we have egos, and we have an identity as humans and as organizations, and we want to build out our own organization, and want to have recognition, and I think that's all. I mean, we're not saints, and so we have to accept that to some extent, that's going to happen. But that being said, yeah, there's certainly coalitions that we can build. We have these meta organizations, for instance, for the whole movement. Like, I'm just saying something like Phonalytics, for instance, that does research and disseminates the research from academia to the movement in a way that it can use, easily digestible. So that's an example of looking at the whole movement and looking at what might be useful for this whole movement. And we can also like put up or found meta fundraising organizations or all kinds of organizations that help a lot of people. Yeah, and I also think that maybe emphasizing also collaboration with external partners and players is relevant here with companies and institutional partners. I think it's always necessary to keep increasing our reach, and we can only do that if we work together with other partners. And it's always going to mean compromise. They're never going to spread your message in the way that you want it to be spread ideally. We want to go vegan message, but they're going to say something else. And we have to accept that. And if you can't compromise, if you say like, look, it's only this message that I want to spread, then the only option you have is just to hand out leaflets in the street. But that's not going to, yeah, or today you can also use social media. But I think you're going to have a lot bigger reach if you have multipliers, if you have other companies, organizations who can help spread your message to more people.
What forms of animal advocacy are you most excited about, both that are currently happening and ones that are on the horizon?
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, when I started, it was just people handing out things in the street, and we were all printing flyers and distributing leaflets and holding signs, etc. And today, it's so different. So, I mean, if you take under if you also include, for instance, business activism in there, yeah, that then there's so many companies creating from often from a viewpoint of we going to like take animals out of the food chain, like an ethical inspiration, ethical motivation, doing such great activist work, basically, or advocacy. I'm excited or hopeful also about more and more legal work, trying to challenge the legal system in terms of animal welfare in different countries. Political work also. For instance, I was just listening at this conference to Rune from the Danish Vegetarian Society, Denmark, who they got a grant from the Danish government, or the Danish government is spending about 180 million euros on the plant-based transition. So that is because of lobbying the government. So yeah, lawmakers and politicians, they have to be tackled and they have to be confronted or they have to be lobbied. Also like financial activism, I think, and fundraising and trying to move money in the right direction. People who are in a position to do that, I think that is it's like top level, very important. Community building is also important. Like we need a movement that is resilient and that is effective and that can go on for decades and decades more, and that doesn't get smaller, but that gets bigger. So yeah, also a very important aspect. And there's many ways of being an activist or doing activism that I'm excited about. At ProVeg, we're also we have a new incubator, which is called Kickstarting for Good, where we have like a short list of ideas for nonprofits that we would like to see people tackle. And so we're inviting people to work around these ideas and try to set up an organization. We give them support to do that. So yeah, a lot of stuff going on. I think that we've professionalized quite a bit in the last decade or so, and I can see still a lot more professionalization, a lot more involvement of people from all kind of walks of life and all professions getting involved in this, and this movement getting a lot more professional still.
I'm a big fan of Kickstarting for Good. I see a lot of potential there and many stellar ideas that can be implemented by more people. Speaking of advocacy, effectiveness, and getting involved, I think it's important to remember that no matter which form of advocacy speaks to us the most, what's truly important is that we engage and do what's most effective for animals. That might be some of the examples you used where high-level financial aspects of lobbying come into play. These things might not be what we're necessarily comfortable with as advocates, but we need to push ourselves out of our comfort zone to do the things that are most effective and most impactful for animals. So, great ideas there, Tobias. Please tell me, why are you vegan?
For me, it's always been for the animals. So just I became vegan, or well, a long time after I first asked the question, why do I treat my dog differently than the cow that is in the meadow across the street in the rain? And I found out that for myself, I didn't have an answer to that question. I said like, okay, I have to stop eating animals, and then it took me 10 years to actually stop. So I understand how other people have a hard time, but this, of course, was 25 years ago. It was harder back then. But yeah, I think that the things we do to animals, I would say with Yuval Noah Harari that it's probably the biggest crime in human history. Um, it is a crime so big that you can hardly imagine how big it is. The numbers are too big for us to fathom, too big for us to like just imagine. And yeah, I find myself in my activism. I still find myself even after 25 years, often trying to find new ways to formulate and to make clear to people how big this horror actually is. It's just out of proportion. It's incredible. So that's what I want to spend my life on to solve, and I'm glad that there's many people who have the same idea.
In order for us to create that vegan world that we want to create, it really does depend on us to do as much effective work as possible. Which brings me to my final questions for you. How do we create a vegan world?
Yeah, well, we discussed some tactics and strategies, and this is to some extent what I wrote my book about. And I think pragmatism has a big place in it. Maybe I can answer with I have this talk about this topic or on this topic, and I talk about four ingredients that we need in our movement for a more effective movement to create a vegan world. And so those four ingredients are open-mindedness, which is about being open-minded as to what works, like not sticking to the rules, not being dogmatic, but like wanting to listen to new theories, etc. Rationality, which is about yeah, telling the truth, not spreading too much propaganda, I think, but being rational, being evidence-based. I think that's important. Empathy. It's very easy to be empathic towards animals, but it's sometimes less easy for us to be empathic towards humans. So I think it remains very important to try to understand where people come from, try to not forget that most of us were not vegan once and that we had the same objections and stupid arguments, etc., that we were there in a lot of cases. So to remain kind to people, I think that's still the best recipe for change. If we don't understand people, if we don't get close to people, they won't change. And so this whole polarization that is happening on so many levels, I think that's not very productive, and I think we should not play that game. And lastly, after open-mindedness, the rationality and empathy, there's also positivity, the hope and yeah, optimism and believing in people, believing that we can do this, that we can make it. Sometimes, like I said, I have to force myself to believe. But yeah, we have to maybe fake it until we make it. I continue to believe, sometimes against better judgment, in people's empathy and their rationality, and also in science and technology to create alternatives. And I do think that one day we're going to look back at this period, and we're going to wonder how on earth was this possible, and people are going to write PhDs and studies and books to explain why we did what we did, and they won't understand, and they will need an entire book to explain it, and it will seem completely weird to them. That's what I believe.
I believe all of that, and I thoroughly believe that being kind to people is a great way to get people to become kind to animals. So I'm right there with you, brother. So, how can people get involved with your work and take action for animals with you?
So, well, I'm involved with ProVeg, so they can check out ProVeg if they want to get involved there as volunteers, or as maybe we have job vacancies. in several countries. So that's proveg.com. My personal page is at veganstrategist.org. My book is How to Create a Vegan World. I'm on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram or TikTok. I'm too old for that. Yeah, that's about it. I think that if people want to have a better idea of my views as explained in this podcast, they can also check out the videos on my website. So there's talks, recordings of talks, or read the book or whatever. So yeah.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me, Tobias. It was great.
Thank you, and best of luck.
Tobias's embrace of pragmatism and choices to focus on compassion and kindness and understanding in his advocacy is commendable. I greatly appreciated hearing his insights. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you felt like this conversation was meaningful, please share with your family and friends. Also, please like, share, and subscribe to listen to upcoming episodes.